Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming today for the screening of our film Beyond the Bridge and for our panel discussion now. My name is Lisa Laughlin. I am the Executive Director of the West Indianapolis Development Corporation. We do affordable housing here in West Indy. That's our whole goal, is to provide housing for low-income folks and to help relieve that burden that you heard about during the film, as we're all very aware of what housing prices have become here in Indianapolis, and our job is to try and counter that and to make housing safe, stable, and affordable. With us today, we have Chelsea Herring-Cozy. Sorry, I'm bad at pronouncing names. Chelsea is with Coalition for Homelessness Intervention and Prevention. We have Tabitha McLemore, who is with the IMPD Homeless Outreach Division. We have Andrew Merkley, who is the head of the Office of Public Health and Safety. You met Dawn earlier. And on the end, we have Kevin Watson, who is a member here at the church in the ministry team, and also a formerly homeless gentleman who is here today to tell you about his experiences and how housing has changed his life. So we're going to start with Kevin, and then we'll have each of these folks introduce themselves after Kevin tells you his story, a little bit about what they do, and then we're going to open it up for questions. We do have microphones in the audience, so Cassandra, who's over to my right, your left, and Antoinette, your right, my left, will, if you've got a question, raise your hand. They'll bring you the microphone. Thank you very much.
Okay, my name is Kevin Watson, and let me stand up for that feedback. This is my home church, but it didn't always used to be my home. The streets were my home, my tent was my home, and solitude was my home. Due to a nervous breakdown, and from that, and what stemmed from that, an occasion at Wheeler Mission, trips to the Horizon House, trips to jail because of substance abuse and alcoholism. There was times, bright moments, when in those dark times that I saw some hope, but they weren't sustainable, so I would wind up back being homeless again. And what I've heard today from Housing First is true. Housing first has to be first. Everything else would come along the way. So when I came to this church back in 2018, I was very much high when I came to church. I was very much drunk when I came to church. I was very much out of my mind, not in my right mind when I first came to this church. But my girlfriend at that time, when I was experiencing homelessness, wanted to go to church. And we came here through a mutual acquaintance, my cousin. He said, "Oh, I know where a bunch of churches. You can go get you some clothes, you can go get some food for free, and we can just kick it at the churches, and then we can go do this and do that, do this and do that." You know the story. He wanted to show me how to get a handout and how the community of homelessness gets handouts. I needed something more than a handout. And I knew right then and there that was a stark difference. Because when you're homeless, yeah, the handouts are okay, but what do you really, really need? A home. A home. A place to call home. A place to lay your head. A place where you can sleep at night, even if it's to cry to yourself. And there's nothing wrong with crying, as long as it's a good cry, a healthy cry, a real cry. And in those moments of back and forth, I said, "Lord, if you just help me get a home." How many times has someone said, "Lord, if you just help me do one thing"? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. It's called insanity. And God even knows that. But for some reason, this time it was very different. It was different in the fact that I did not want to be homeless anymore. And I didn't want a handout. I wanted my self-respect back. I wanted my dignity back. I wanted to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. I wanted to be able to look in the mirror and see a man who I am first. I couldn't worry about the next person. I had to look in that mirror and look at me and see who I wanted to be and where I wanted to be in my future. And once I made up my mind that, okay, whatever it takes, I'm getting out of this. And Lord, whatever door you open, I'm going right through it. And it so happened that the church had AA in the basement. It so happened that the church had a parsonage that allowed me to stay there until I met Lisa with WIDC. And I was in affordable housing. And my girlfriend at that time, Shannon, she is now my wife. Was right there with me throughout most of the whole ordeal. She wasn't with me when I was going through, back when I was at Wheeler Mission and going through Horizon House, trying to get housing and being on the waiting list and all of that. She met me when I was just coming out of it, so to speak. But nonetheless, she was there. And since 2018, the first time that I walked through these doors, until becoming a pastor here at this church, my journey has been wonderful. My journey has been great. Not only did having a home create a space for me to lay my head, but I also found a church home and a church family that became, unbeknownst to them, counselors that I needed. I didn't have money for a counselor, so my church family was my counselors, and they didn't know it. Every step of the way, along the way through this journey called life, there has been some kind of support that I wasn't expecting and I wasn't aware of. But thanks be to God first, but to WIDC here on the west side of Indianapolis offered me a place to lay my head and call home. And it's not by mere coincidence that our sanctuary is filled with our neighbors, my friends, some of my people that have lived in my house, because I know what it feels like and I know where they're at. And I know my wife is like, okay, you can't help everyone, you can't. I said, but you can do one. We can do one. We can do our part with one. Thank you.
Is this on? Okay. Thank you. It's an honor to be here with y'all today and to talk a little bit about a belief that we hold pretty strongly at CHIP, and I'm with CHIP, in that housing should be a human right. And we do not treat it that way in this country. But that is the place that we start, and the foundation that we are building off of, is that one core belief that housing is a human right, and everybody should have the right to have safe, affordable, dignified housing, a door to lock, to have that privacy, to have that safe space to be. And we know we don't have enough of that in Indianapolis right now. We are working from a place of scarcity, where we don't have enough accessible housing for people, habitable housing that meets what everybody should consider a basic standard of living. And that is part of the work that we are doing at CHIP, is trying to fight for additional housing for everybody in our community who needs it, that's accessible, that's offered, as you said, first, without a bunch of preconditions or hoops to jump through to prove that you deserve housing, because we believe everyone deserves housing. So that's part of the work that we're working on and trying to lead right now at the State House, at the local level, is how do we make that a reality here in not just Indianapolis, but in Indiana, to reduce those barriers, to change the conversation from homelessness as a personal decision or a personal failure. Bullshit is what we say. Homelessness is a housing problem, it's a policy decision, and we're making the wrong decisions right now. It is not the fault of the person who's experiencing homelessness, it is the fault of systems that have been set up that aren't working. And so the work that, again, we're doing at CHIP is to try to challenge those myths and all that misleading information about what the drivers and causes of homelessness are, to try to ground our shared work in that belief of housing as a human right, to do that state-level advocacy, and to work with a lot of partners on this panel and people sitting right out here today to really move forward the belief that we are better than what our current reality is. And that nobody in our city or any city across the state should be living or dying on our streets. And if this weather does not tell us the urgency of that, I don't know what else can. And so that is, again, why we're here, why we're so thankful to Don and the movie that he and Tim made that are really elevating this conversation in a lot of different places to say, we actually know what the solutions are. We know what the right way is. We've never invested in it to make it happen. And how do we do that? How do we get the resources to get more housing for more people, to reduce barriers to signing leases, to home ownership, and to do that at the scale that's needed? Because the need is way more than what we have resources to do, and that's not okay. So that's a little bit about our work and what grounds our work. Would love to pass it over. Do you want just go down the line to Major McLemore to talk a little bit about their team and their work?
Hi, everybody. I am Tabby McLemore. I am with our Operations Support Bureau with IMPD. With that, it houses our homeless unit, our MCAT, which is our Mobile Crisis Assistance Team, and our park rangers. So a bunch of other stuff too. But those are our big key points of our bureau, and they are all about community service and giving back to our community. We're all very lucky that we can all go on any of our runs or go out into the community and take our time and not feel like we have to be rushed to get back into service or back to do other law enforcement responsibilities. With us, we're all about the community, giving back, taking our time, being out there, meeting people where they're at. If it's back in a camp where we're hiking out there a mile to talk to them to help to get them resources. We're not out there to criminalize homelessness or take away people's rights when they're just trying to live and trying to get by. We're very, very thankful for that, and I couldn't do what I do without the support from our chiefs, but also without the support of everybody up here. Sometimes law enforcement gets a bad rap, and we don't get a fair shake sometimes with all the good work that we're doing. But the officers that I have that do the work that they do have the biggest hearts possible, And these people that I work up here were able to see through the stigma of what's out on the street with law enforcement and give us a chance. And since 2018, I've been able to work side by side with Chelsea. Met Lisa several years ago, and Andrew came on board with us a few years back. And we are all just in this together and a big, huge partnership, and very, very thankful to be able to be a part of this. And Director Merkley.
Thanks, Tabby. My name is Andrew Merkley. I'm the director of the Office of Public Health and Safety. And in my previous role with the agency, I oversaw our Homelessness and Eviction Prevention Division. So the Office of Public Health and Safety was created by Mayor Hogsett back in 2016 with the mission of reducing violent crime in the city of Indianapolis by addressing root causes of crime. And so we have 5 divisions that are all focused on trying to reduce crime, but really, so we have our homelessness division, our behavioral health division, food and nutrition division, public safety through our violence reduction team, and our reentry division. We oversee the assessment and intervention center, the clinician-led community response team, which is an integral part of our response for our unsheltered neighbors. We also have implemented our eviction prevention programs in all the courts around Marion County to help folks stay in their homes so that they don't end up being homeless. And we are building the new housing hub on the downtown, which will be a really unique model for providing services to our neighbors in partnership with Horizon House and Aspire Indiana Health, who will operate that facility. We've learned a lot since the agency started, and our homeless response is really, through the office, is really focused on crisis intervention and helping our neighbors who are on the streets. And so that's why we will oversee and build the housing hub. We've learned through the pandemic the need to provide wraparound services at one location, and it makes it a lot faster and easier to house our neighbors when they can go to one location and receive all those services. So very excited to be up here and with you today. As Tabby and Chelsea both said, you know, we look at homelessness through a very different lens than a lot of folks, and we've been working really hard to implement Streets to Home and get our neighbors housed. So, Don?
You just listened to me for 84 minutes, so we're just filmmakers. Our first film was Under the Bridge, the criminalization of homelessness. It focused on a homeless camp here in Indianapolis, and we just kept getting the question, you know, around the country, like, what's the solution? And that led to this film. We took it seriously. We didn't know what any solutions were before we started, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy film to make, but we're happy we made it.
But I would like to open it up to all you for questions, and thank you, Dawn, for kind of keying that up at the very beginning of our presentation. He asked, why are you here? And you all had questions. So please feel free, raise your hand, the ladies will bring you the microphone, and we'll just go very orderly if we would, please.
Yes, I have several questions. Number one, when the people can't pay ever, and the utilities they can't pay, can they still live in those places, the apartments or the homes? What do you do about those homeless people? I mean, some of them are mentally ill, some of them are physically ill, and some of them are felons even sometimes. And they're good people, even if they're felons sometimes. And for one thing, trying to get the help to get like a Social Security, I forget, SSI. Anyway, they can't get it because there's so much government fraud. Anyway, my mouth is dry, so please forgive me. And if you know what I'm saying, tell me. But anyway, there's a lot of problems. And what if they can't pay? And then also you do have the mentally ill that I know that get kicked out of these apartments when there is something handed to them because they are mentally ill and there's no one there to help them. I mean, and then there's a lot. I have homeless people in my home that come and go. I've gone through 3 washers and looking for another one because I have people coming in using my laundry, my home washers. What I'm getting is I hear stories, and so I'm just asking questions. You're all talking about this home. Who's going to pay for them to build it? And if you can't pay a rent or home, and even like when we have these so-called low-income homes built, people are still having to sometimes pay $1,000 a month. And they don't make that much money. When I was working, I was making $20 an hour, which was 100 years ago, and that was high class. Now 20 is still low class money. And you can't afford anything with $20 an hour if you have even one child, and then we don't have any babysitting thing. I mean, you could keep me talking, I'll shut up now.
Yeah, so I can start a little bit. So, let's start with the facts. Rents in Indianapolis are too high, and we've seen rents increase over 30% over the last 2 years, and we know that income is not keeping up. We know that from a National Low-Income Housing Coalition report, you would have to make about $24 to $26 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom fair market rent apartment in Indy. Okay, so there's a big gap between wages and rents. So to your point, a lot of what we advocate for and try to secure resources for is rental assistance that can help somebody get into housing and support that rent until they can either get better employment, get some income supports, be able to sustain. But there are rental assistance programs called rapid rehousing, and a lot of that comes right now from the federal government, which I have thoughts about. We need federal resources, but we can't stop and only rely on federal resources. But rapid rehousing can pay up to 2 years of rental assistance to get somebody back in housing on their feet. For those who can then maybe get higher income, a better job, supports, ideally you sustain after 2 years. But there are people that will need longer-term subsidy because of that big gap between rent and income. And the ways that we do that, and I'll start by saying there's not enough, is either through what's called permanent supportive housing, which will pay rent indefinitely for people who may have disabling conditions that need that long-term support, or through a housing voucher. And I don't want to keep being Debbie the Downer, but right now we don't have access to housing vouchers. Our housing agency is in, what would we call it, recovery, receivership. Our housing agency's in bad shape. And so we have not had access to housing vouchers, but housing vouchers are the most effective resource for addressing what you're describing. Supplementing rent, filling those gaps so people can get in and stay in housing when we know that there's a big difference between rent and wages. Housing vouchers, when communities have them and can get them out to people who need them, are the most effective resource. And so we're fighting for those still, but we don't have them right now. And as long as rents keep going up and wages don't, we will have to continue bringing rental assistance and subsidy to support households.
So my question is, my name is Joshua Kelly. I'm Executive Director for All Things for the Kingdom. So I got a couple of questions. One was, how do you navigate the current political system, like the current government, when it sounds like part of the funding is going to have to come from the federal government or have to come from the local level and have to come from philanthropy, right? And you got 3 more years of this, right? I've looked into housing first. Pros and cons, great, right? One of the questions I had about that is like, you always hear about the money that it saves from more police department calls, mental health, hospitals, right? But that saves the department's money. It saves the health care system money. How do you recoup that money to put it back into the program, right? Because the program is going to see increases, just like we all see increases in our grocery bills and our rents. So they are subject to inflation as well too, right? So the other thing is, how do you prevent something like Housing First becoming like the shelters? Because something always starts off good, right? Because there is so much free money, right? There is so much grant money and free money. How do you prevent that from becoming something we just complained about in the film?
Well, there's a lot of questions in there. I mean, yes, it does save money, and yes, it does save money for the healthcare system. For example, there are several places where the healthcare system is contributing housing money now to house people, to keep them out of emergency rooms. You know, that kind of collaboration is effective for everyone. You know, Housing First is a tricky thing. You can't call everything Housing First. Just because somebody puts somebody into a home, if there's not case management and access to supportive services, it's not Housing First. Housing First itself, done to fidelity, is the best intervention there is possibly. But it cannot, if you're housing 3 people and 5 people become homeless, then it doesn't look any different out there in the city. The problem with homeless responses is it is the government, law enforcement, and service providers, and the rest of the community points fingers at the failure. That's the problem. It is the system has to integrate together, because the system, as it first got put together before anybody was in their positions here, it was separate from everything that's needed, like the healthcare system, the business community, the faith community. All of it has its role. So the only places that are having success, like Milwaukee and Houston, are the ones that recognize that you can't look at, it's just saving the police department money, it's just saving the health, you know, because if it's one system that everybody is working within, then it's one system that is, you know, either progressing or going back, and everybody looks at it that way. All I can really say is that this community with the street to home, which, you know, look, it's just getting started. It's yet to be determined if everybody's going to dig deep enough to make it work, but it sure is set up to work, you know. So it's going to have to, you know, if it ever becomes siloed, it's going to fail. If it ever becomes separated as you just described, it's going to fail. Win together, lose together is what it comes down to.
When I first got into this 5 years ago, is that it is so isolated. My other part of the question would be, like smaller outreaches like ours, right? Where do we fit into this? We know we're not housing.
I tried housing. It's tough, right? So it's more of stay in your lane and where can we walk with you through this when we meet people where they're at, right? So my question would be, is because it is so divided, it is, sometimes I don't think outreaches know that we're serving the same people, right? And so we are a resource sharing ministry. Some of the other organizations in here, we help you guys out and you don't even know about us, right? We stock food pantries, we've delivered to Sheltering Wings, I know who's in here, we've delivered, and we're very happy working from behind the scenes. But what do you want from us? When we go out, we get a knock, right? We say, you're giving handouts, You're serving plates of food. You're giving clothes. We look at it as relief, immediate relief. And it also gives us a chance to meet people where they're at and really have a relationship with them so that we can identify needs and walk with them through it. What do you need from us? I'm not going to go back to school and do housing, right?
Let me just say, please keep that level of not only enthusiasm but looking around. I had a conversation with Chelsea the other day. There's going to be a reach out to the grassroots, people who are closer to the street, working with folks, and hopefully that's going to all become like maybe one meeting, regular meetings or whatever, to figure that exact thing out. And that's what I'm saying. If this becomes siloed up here, it's not going to work. Nothing is going to work. So anyway, give your card or whatever, get your information to Chelsea. I'm going to pile more stuff on your plate.
Can I ask this question? Trip a little bit to this question?
She's got a microphone.
Okay, well, if he says he's handing out and knowing where the people are, why couldn't he come and tell you guys that, where we're all at and homeless, so that could help you guys out and help us get housing that need it? Like myself, I'm homeless. I've been homeless for 8 years.
All right, I'll jump in here just real quick. So we have the PBSO, the Professional Blended Street Outreach Group, which is a bunch of different organizations that all come together. There's a monthly meeting. They actually combine different groups. So you'll have someone from like HIP or Horizon House, and they'll go out together so that everybody's actually working together. With that, our unit, the homeless unit, partners up every single Wednesday with the Poor House and goes out and does outreach. We also have adult and child's outreach that comes out with us on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But within the PBSO, there's an email group, so there's emails that go out. We coordinate with OPHS. We also coordinate with CHIP so that we're all communicating together. The homeless unit, we have a QR code, so anybody within the city, because we're our citywide unit, can send out to that QR code if they have any kind of complaint or request or welfare check or anything involving our homeless neighbors. And then we go out. It doesn't matter where it's at, where it's in the woods, private property. It doesn't matter. We can go, and we can find out if the individual needs help or what they're needing and resources, and then we can communicate with OPHS, with CHIP, with the other outreach groups. We do have some smaller groups that aren't a part of PBSO that reach out to us that we still coordinate with and work with. So that's the biggest thing, is just getting with those groups so that everybody can get out there.
Yeah, I think to Tabby and Don's point, I mean, there are so many groups doing this really important work, and thank you for what your group is doing for our neighbors. The more that we can collaborate, the more that we can, more groups that join PBSO, the better we can be at identifying the needs of folks and where they are in our city. Horizon House is the lead agency, but there are not enough outreach workers part of PBSO in order to serve the 400 square miles of Marion County. So we need more collaboration, and we need your help.
So my question would be then, how would he go about it?
We can absolutely help get you connected with Horizon House.
I have a question, but how do y'all deal, like, you have people that have income, but it's hard for them to get their income back because they was
Okay, my question was, I'm Willie. People have checks, right, but they account is fraudulent. Like, how do y'all deal with the big fraud, the fraud that's going on out?
So with the fraud, are you talking about like leasing agencies and things like that?
Yeah, like the fraud, like what's going on, like people losing their housing, their checks, and all.
So
like,
we
due to
actually
fraud?
have, if you do a police report, we actually have detectives that look into that. And we, the police, will not go in and just evict somebody from those apartments or things like that if they do have what they believe is a valid lease, and they have to go through eviction processes and things like that. So what the police do is we investigate it on our end to go after those individuals. So we always encourage people, though, that if they're going to sign a lease, go up to the main office, make sure you are meeting with actual staff and not just meeting directly at an apartment, just to make sure that you're trying to protect yourself as well. But if you feel like you are a victim of that, just immediately report it so that we can actually start the investigation with that.
Hi, thanks for being here, and welcome to our guests from down the hall who came to be a part of this conversation. I think that's a really important piece. Just is we talked about income. Our federal minimum wage is at $7.25 an hour, and it's been that since 2009. I was making that in 1980. Right? You can't do anything with that. But that's just a side note. How do you? I get questions, like with people who live kind of separated from this. Like the other night, when I stayed here overnight helping. Somebody's like, well, you had your own room to sleep in, right? Aren't you afraid? And, what? You slept on the floor with these people? Yeah, I mean, they're human beings. But one of my questions, and kind of deals with fraud, is I get calls all the time from these people who want to buy my house. And I know that, legit investors and things like that, but my feeling is all they're going to do is drive up the cost of housing and make it even less affordable. How do we educate people to say no to that? Because they're not even from in the state of Indiana sometimes, and they want to buy our house and invest in it, and that's just no good, right? I mean, thank you.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like, if you know about that and you have spaces like this to educate people about what is behind those private equity firms, do educate people as you can. The bigger issue is this is a state policy issue. Indiana is a very landlord-friendly state. It is not a tenant-friendly state. We allow a lot of out-of-state private equity firms to come into our state to buy up property, and that takes a lot of housing out of the market, and it prices people out of neighborhoods, and those are the things we need to be advocating against and fighting for. I know there's a lot of work happening. GMA, the Greater Indianapolis Multi-Faith Alliance, Prosperity Indiana are all at the State House. We are too, really trying to fight for greater tenant protections and tenant rights, and to try to propose legislation that prohibits out-of-state private equity firms from coming into our state, buying up property, being negligent. These are big issues here in Indiana in particular. And so I think one is the education, but the second is to do more advocacy at the State House. If you're able to show up to follow some of these bills, we can help you follow some of these bills. This has to be done at a state policy level too, so that we can protect more tenants and stop some of these practices that, again, make housing really inaccessible to people, drive up prices, and bring out-of-state interest into our state.
Topic that we really need to talk to our representatives about on the street and tell them we need this bill.
100%, yes.
Hi. What can we do to stop those management companies, for one, especially ones that are running? Trailer parks have separate laws different than regular tenancy. If you own a trailer, you only have to have a lease for so long, but they don't tell you that if once they decide that they don't want you there anymore, whether it's for prejudice, for whatever reasons, doesn't matter that you do the right thing, and that you're a good citizen and you work and you do everything like you're supposed to, being a good neighbor, helping others, they can put you out on the street and destroy your life. just because they want to. What can we do to change that?
And thank you for sharing. I can feel your frustration and heartbreak around these kinds of laws. I'll say the same thing. This has to be tackled at the state level, and to have legislation that protects people who are in housing. The other group I'll mention that can come in and give trainings and talks and make sure you know what your rights are and how to keep pushing. The Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana does some really great education, training, and advocacy. We need to hear more from people that are affected by the policies and the laws that aren't working, because those stories help get lifted up then to the State House to say, look at the real human lives that are being destroyed by these kinds of policies. And so it is, one, connecting with whoever your representative is and sharing if you have a personal story or experience about how these laws have impacted you. And then to also make sure you're connected with, like, the Fair Housing Center. They have been able to file suits against discriminatory landlords. They have been able to take even collective action if they get more and more people kind of sharing the same experiences. So those are some of the ways I would suggest, like, pushing on these things, because these things do have to be changed.
What is it that we can do to legally, and you being a police officer might be able to answer this, what is it that we can do legally when you have a child that is mentally ill and you go and you get the mental writs, you go down to Eskenazi, you get the mental writs, you do everything legally like you're supposed to do, you get them into Eskenazi, but then they take their medicine even though they have a history of being on a commitment, but then was dropped off of that commitment because it was in a different city and not realizing that it needed to be brought back to Marion County in order to put that into place. So because somebody says, yes, that they can stay with me behind their back, thinking that they have that commitment to help them, help their child, what can we do to stop that? Because that adds to the homelessness as well and puts people on the street that are gravely ill, like my child. He's gravely ill. And I showed that different times when he gets arrested for trespassing. Showed them that paperwork, and they just let him plea bargain out.
I think what would probably be best is you need to make sure that you're communicating with the doctors, but also with the prosecutors that are involved in the cases. So within the prosecutor's office, there's the quality of life unit. And with that, our unit deals with them all the time. We do not encourage arrest when it's involving mental health, but sometimes we have to, just because that's the only way to really get them the help that they need, because there is a mental health team within the jail that we can start to try to push a little bit of treatment and help onto them. But I think the biggest thing would be talking with that quality of life unit, because they can go the route to get them mental health treatment rather than getting the charges on them and just pleading them out.
I'm saying that's the problem. You give the paperwork to the prosecutor and to the public defenders, and they just dismiss it and allow a plea, and then they just accept it just so that they're not in jail, because that's just added onto the trauma that has already been, everything is caused by trauma, so it just adds to the trauma and to the mental illness.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle, and believe me, we struggle with it all the time too within our unit, especially with our MCAT team. And the only thing I can say is, and just keep reaching out for the quality of life unit. Don't go, if you can't get that prosecutor to reach out to them, reach out to the quality of life unit yourself within the prosecutor's office. Give them the information, let them know. If you have to call the police or the police are involved, ask for MCAT, ask for the CLCR. We all deal with the quality of life unit on a regular basis and can help to try to get that ball rolling. and to get behind the scenes a little bit more. So don't be afraid to just keep asking and keep bugging them and pestering them. Because I'll tell you, that's the way I get a lot of stuff done around here, is people just get tired of me pestering them.
I did. I had first connections with Southwest. He gave me a call.
With Detective Lomax?
Yeah, well, with him, that he put me in connection with, shoot, I think her name now. I know it.
It's okay. We can
With him.
Stephanie.
Yes.
Yes.
And had even put everything through like a wraparound team of doctors and stuff until the group home that he was in after getting out of the state hospital had him sign the wrong ROI and then turn around and send him, even though he was dirty, to IOT.
And that's yep.
I'm just.
It's a vicious cycle that we battle to, and it's not, and that's what I tell people all the time, is that just because you're battling mental health doesn't mean you're stupid. And a lot of people can go and they can talk to the doctors, and they know that they need to act right for a certain amount of time just to get right back out on the street again. And I think that's what society fails to realize, is that mental health doesn't make you stupid. Like, they know exactly what they're doing. And, and we've got to find a way to really try to push that treatment and that help on them to get them where they need to be.
Well, 2 questions. My first question is, what are you guys doing to help prevent people? Because there is
people that's been homeless for 3 years trying to look for housing. I know quite a few myself. They have the stuff, it's just they ain't getting through and getting their housing. And my second question is, what are you guys doing for people that don't do drugs or anything? There's a lot of rehab, halfway housing, and other type of housing, but there is none for those who don't have substance abuse or whatnot.
Well, I'll start with your first question. The city of Indianapolis has invested historic amounts of money into various programming and construction and trying to solve these challenges. One of those programs is our tenant advocacy project. And so we, in all 9 townships in Marion County, as well as the Superior Court, we fund legal aid and navigation services so that if you are ever in eviction, you have access to free legal aid, so that you can try to reduce the impacts of the eviction, or hopefully save you from that eviction. And so that's one way that we try to prevent homelessness from ever occurring. I think Chelsea can probably speak more to some of your other questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by the downside, and that is there's not enough habitable, safe housing in Indianapolis for everybody who needs it, right? So we do need to keep pushing for new development of specifically affordable housing at the lowest AMIs, right? Like, we need much more. And then we need to make sure the housing that is out here is habitable, right? That has heat and running water and all of that, and really pushing to make sure that they meet people's standards. So that's the downside, is we need more housing and better housing available to people. But for what is out there, there is a team at Our Door Affordable Housing that is focused specifically on something we call housing navigation. How do you help people find units that are in the market that do meet standards and support them through that housing process, right? Looking at units, signing and reading leases, helping with that move-in and some of the initial costs that come with move-in. Because, I mean, if you've lost housing, it is damn expensive to get back into housing. You got to have security deposit, first month's rent, app fees. Who has $4,000 laying around, right? So there are some flexible funds that have come to the table to help with those initial move-in costs. So the team at Our Door that helps with housing navigation, Lindsay, Adam, Bonnie, they help, again, people in that search process. And if you have actual if you have income, you just need help finding units and maybe some of that flex funds, they're a great team to help in that process.
So how does he get connected with Ardor? Him and his friends, how do they get connected?
Yeah, I mean, I can share contact information. Ardor has a website, and they're listed on that website. The whole team is listed on that website with their contact information, which is why I was saying their names. Lindsay, Adam, and Bonnie are housing navigators. There is a team of housing, what we call acquisition specialists. They're the ones that are out there finding units, trying to negotiate with landlords to waive application fees and things like that. But that whole team at Ardor, they're on the website, their names, contact information. That's a great place to start.
Hello, I appreciate you having this panel. So I've been homeless almost 3 years, and the issue that I've run into that's reoccurring is I'm stuck in a catch-22, where my resume has customer service, sales, things of that nature on it, and I'm trying to complete my associate's degree, 5 credits away. I can't afford the last 5 credits. The catch-22 that I'm running into is that I know that there are resources once I have income. I do have a background, so my criminal background prevents me from getting some jobs, but other jobs, I'm not really understanding how come it is that over these past 3 years and a little bit longer, I have been just wholly unable to find any I've been unable to find a job. I've been unable to get hired anywhere so that I can use the resources that the city has in place for me. So once I do have income, now I can get assistance finding myself a place to, be housed or whatever the case may be. So I'm caught in a catch-22. I can't improve my resume. I can't get a job to be able to get the resources that the city may have available for me. Without those resources, I can't get housed. Without that, that housing, I'm stuck still trying to find, get my mail sent to Horizon House, and I'm just stuck. I don't know what to do to be able to push forward in terms of getting employed somewhere with a place that fits my resume, because I could go and get a job at a warehouse or something like that. But I know me, and let's face it, we all know us. If I'm not used to working in a warehouse, I keep that job for a month. I'm not going to really want to keep that job for much longer than that. And it prevents me from being able to complete school. To be working for $14, $15 an hour and working all week, there's no ability for me to do anything other than work at that job. So now I can't improve my resume. My main question is, why do I always see these places that are hiring, but I can't get hired? A couple years ago, there was the law was removed to where you're not really supposed to be asking about a person's background like that. So what happened with that, and why am I still being unable to get a job?
Yeah, so they did ban the box, right? So they can't ask you during your interview or in the application if you have a background. What I would say is the Office of Public Health and Safety, we have our reentry division, and we have an employment specialist for folks with criminal backgrounds. And her name is Andrea. She's been here this week while we've had the shelter open. I would encourage you to reach out to her if you didn't have the opportunity to meet with her. But we have lots of partners that can help with finding employment for individuals like yourself. We also have some barrier buster funds, which help folks with first month's rent. Whatever barriers are keeping you from being able to access that work that you're looking for, we can help try to pay for some of those things to get you back started on your feet.
And again, I appreciate that. The last time I was in trouble with the law was in 2010, 19. I came from Lafayette. I was a team lead in the job that I was working in Lafayette. I came from Lafayette to visit my daughter and got pulled over going home. I don't have a license. So I'm attempting to get my license back. I'm free and clear to be able to get my license back, and was released from incarceration in January of 2022. But since January of 2022, I have been unable to find adequate employment to fit my resume. And that is the thing that prevents me from being able to,
Right.
Let's
connect after this because I've got a team that can help you.
All right. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
A question that I have is I'd like to discuss what has been successful. I think it's been about 6 or 7 months since the Leonard Street camp was cleaned up, and I know that there were some folks that were housed. The plan was for about 350 people to be housed within 12 months. And I know there was maybe about $8 million that was allocated through different resources. Say for the month of February, how many people do you think that you would maybe be able to get in housing? Let's just talk February. And you say there's a housing shortage. What are the plans? Just talk about success and then maybe give us some good news about what might be occurring this month and maybe into March. Thanks, Chelsea.
Thank you.
And I love the homeless unit. You guys are doing wonderful things. Thank you.
So what she's referencing is the Streets to Home India initiative, which kicked off in July. It is an $8 million local initiative to house 300 to 350 people directly off the streets out of encampments over a 12-month period. So as of now, as of date, and we continue to scale up and move to larger and larger locations, we will be at about 100 people housed in the next week or so. We have officially closed 3 camps only after housing everyone from those 3 locations. So Black Mountain was the first kind of pilot site, and then we moved to Leonard Street camp, and there were 20-some people housed from Leonard Street. Then we moved to Tyson, a camp kind of along Pleasant Run Parkway. We have now been in what we call a zone engagement strategy. So this isn't just about people in camps. It's also people sleeping in larger areas, maybe 1 person, 2 people here. And we've been doing what we would call a zone engagement now since about November. And so we are anticipating hitting about 100 people here in the next week. And so about a third of way to the goal of getting 300 to 350 people in housing by midsummer of this year. And as this initiative ramped up in 2025, we are now on pace as we're moving to larger and larger locations. And what that comes with is 12 months of rental assistance, intensive housing case management support. Everyone who has been housed so far is still in housing, engaged in those services. And so we, again, plan to, after we really focus on people outside, to start to then move into shelters and get those who have been stuck in our shelters for far too long out so that we have a much more balanced response system here. The R door?
It's, if you type in RDOOR into Google, it'll pull up.
Yes, I have a question as well. I'm over here. How y'all doing today? Well, first, my name is irrelevant for now. Are there any other grassroots organizations in here other than the gentleman that, if you could just please raise your hand so we know? All right. Well, first off, can we give these people a round of applause for what they do? Can we do that?
I'm going to give you a round of applause for all the work you've done at our shelter over the last week.
I don't need to be known.
I think everyone needs to know. Thank you.
But we like to stay in the background, okay? All right. Like he said, yeah, we do stay in the background. People don't know who we are, what their organizations are, what they do. But we are brave. We focus on men's mental health, and we focus on homelessness and community. Listening to a lot of things that I've heard here today, it's we want to see as us being these smaller grassroots, we want to believe in, these things are happening and this change is, being addressed, but it becomes disheartening when, or a slap in the face, to some of us where we put in this work behind the scenes and then all of a sudden, it's like the city or whoever just jumps in and say, okay, let's hire X, Y, and Z to make these initiatives speed up, and that becomes, like, man, why are we doing this in the first place? But we don't stop because, God has a plan for all of us. And we continue to do this work, not because people, see, I don't get paid for this. No, I put it in the 401k karma bucket because I know one day eventually it's going to pay off. These winter contingency shelters are in place right now. That's until March 31st. Okay? Everybody gets out. What then? What's next? You guys are here. I seen this program and I see the housing first. I hear that. These gentlemen been over here in this shelter since, I'm going to say a little over a month and a half maybe. We got the family shelter here on Tibbs. My question is, why aren't you guys already starting these, or had started having different organizations come into these places to start offering these people the resources they need, that stepping stone to start getting them to where they need to go? So if we're going to do housing first, are these people waiting like years or whatever to get into these kind of programs? Why aren't we having, like, the church is doing great right now? They got a roof over their head. So why can't we find a way to keep that going, have that roof over their head, and get those other, organizations in there to help them, become that, better version of themselves and, just progress farther in life.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I guess the short answer to the kind of the end of your statement, especially at our family location, we do have all of those resources coming in and helping folks so that they don't exit back to homelessness, right? And we were very successful last winter at the other family shelter that we operated, housing 50% of the families that were there, and no one exited to homelessness, or exited back to the street, excuse me. And with this new weather dependent model that we're operating at the church here, there's not as much of that opportunity and time because folks are in and out to get those additional resources. But Aspire Indiana Health has those wraparound services built into what they do in the state of Indiana. So they're bringing all those resources, employment teams, behavioral health teams into the sanctuary to help to address those. And then this week, because we've had the opportunity with the 24/7 operations, OPHS has been bringing in our teams and others. So I hear what you're saying. I hope that having all of these grassroots organizations in the room, we can continue to build upon and bring folks together to work together to end homelessness here in Indianapolis.
What you just said, I'm amplified. But no, what you just said though about them bringing in people, Aspire, because Aspire, they've been there and they've been, they're doing it. And I appreciate Aspire just letting me from day one when they started the men's contingency just to bogart my way in there. Because that's what I did. I said, you guys need food, you guys need support, what do you need? We're going to show up. That's what Brave does, we show up. That's what people can depend and count on us for. And we love doing what we're doing, but I haven't seen that, what you're describing, the people over there with the job stuff, with with the mental health or any of that stuff. We get to go down there and we get to talk to them. You know, we get to, you know, find these other wraparound services. Can I get an ID? Can I get this? Can I get that? Like, we're laser focused on our mission. So we need to find like-minded organizations that want to do the work unconditionally. To be in these kind of fields that we're doing, you have to have unconditional love for everybody and actually care. Be human first. That's what really matters. And everything else will align like it should.
So I have a question. I don't spend a lot of time in Indianapolis these days, not for the last couple of years, so I really don't know everything that's going on here. But let me ask you about the grassroots in this town. Are you guys working together? As all the different grassroots organizations, are you guys coordinated within a system with each other? Do you coordinate with each other and collaborate with each other?
I've been we have been in operation for a year and a month now. You know, okay? So with that being said, we've, you know, fed over probably 2,000 people. We gave out over 100,000 meals, helped them with different things. Now, we're at this point to be able to go to, we want to find like-minded organizations, not just anybody. We've came to terms that when we try to go and partner with bigger organizations, they focus on quantity over quality. You know, and that it loses its way in a sense. Like, I've seen it so much. So yes, the mission right now, we had to see that brain worked before we just said, oh, hey, this is who we are.
No, I get it. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that when we had the big showing at Clues Hall, we showed this film, and it started the Streets to Home thing. It started this community into this direction. The first thing I want to say about this community that hopefully that you guys can give a little slack on the grassroots, and I came from the grassroots. You know, we did a film, Under the Bridge, the criminalization of homelessness. I was in, you know, look, I got threatened to be sued by the city. You know, 150 grand. They threatened to sue. I'm not going to go into that because it's not important. But what I am saying is, I came from the grassroots. I understand exactly what your frustration is. As a city of this size, Indianapolis was one of the worst in the country at its homeless response. You know, right? So what you're experiencing, and hopefully what you can give a little slack to now, is what Indianapolis is attempting now through Streets of Home makes it one of the leaders of the country in terms of implementing proven ways to address homelessness on a win-win basis for everyone in the community, especially those experiencing homelessness. So when you put that on top of a tradition of worst, it's going to take a minute. You know, that's the one thing I'm going to say. The second thing I want to say is that the grassroots, all grassroots organizations has a big identity, you know, and that identity sometimes gets in the way of what's in the way of the traditional ways of doing homelessness in the organizations, the service providers. There is no more divided group in the country than service providers. And it's not even their fault because they're competing for the same dollars. So, and they're working within an industry, they have to say, we're better than them to try to get those dollars, you know, so that collaboration doesn't work. The same problem happens on the grassroots level. When at our, you know, screening at Clues Hall, the question and answer went off the rails. You had some of the leading experts in the country on that panel, And it was completely lost because everybody was getting up, just expressing their frustration about, things that aren't going the way they think that it should go. And everybody's view of how it should go was different from each other because the grassroots is just as siloed, right? So my challenge to you guys would be to begin some collaborative efforts. Maybe you guys are duplicating people that you're working with. Because if I'm like homeless and you're feeding roast beef or something and you're feeding meatloaf, I'm going to go get the roast beef for myself. I might come and get the meatloaf or whatever, and I'm not thinking about, anything. I'm not looking at you any differently than food. I'm not looking at you as somebody who's going to help me. I'm looking at you as someone who's going to help me survive, right? So if you were to do that, and if these guys up here continue to understand that there has to be a connection with your work is your work. They're not going to know who's out there if it's not for you guys. It's not going to be possible. In Milwaukee, this guy, his name's Eric Collins Dyke. He was working for the county, but he was an outreach guy, and another guy, Demir. You saw both of them in the film. They go out like hiking trails into the forest, to find everyone. These folks ain't. You guys know where the people are. It's going to have to be an overall collaborative effort of the whole community, but it's just getting started. So you got to slack up a little bit, but you need to get yourselves together a little bit because there's going to have to be a meeting of this and that in order to be successful.
And there is around the city, Pastor Corey Lawrence and last time over, they do theirs 1 month. There's a few of them, right? And it's just like those who look the part, right?
Like even us, if you go on our website, we have Kingdom Partners, right? And we look for people who are like-minded, have the same principles as us. Same thing. Nobody gets paid to do this, right? We all do this because God provided for us, and He tells us to do that, right? So there is that. But the problem that you get into, I think, is when you start throwing the free money at it. When, like you said, people are competing for the same dollars, right? And this is why it's important, at least for, I won't even go into that. It's more just trying to do it for purpose. You know what I'm saying?
Well, let me ask you, when he mentioned PBSO,
I had no idea what that was.
You didn't know, really?
I had no idea what that
Okay,
was.
but-
We are, if you had asked me 5 years ago before I got into this, I would have called you a liar, the stuff we're doing now. That guy who was talking about housing, we furnished so many apartments, and that wasn't even in the plan. 5 years ago, I was just helping out some friends' ministry, right? What I have experienced in this, and it's important for us to put in the safeguards and the infrastructure so that it doesn't become what you're seeing out here, right? Nothing would satisfy me more than to build this, to hand it off in good hands, and then go be a volunteer again, right? I work a full-time job. I have 2 teenage daughters, been married for 20 years, right? I work at Riley Children's Hospital. And then when I'm not doing any of that, I'm out here doing outreach work.
Sounds like
one
you're
of the
slacking.
biggest, yeah, but one of the biggest, one of the biggest things we do bring to the table is volunteers. And this is where it gets interesting, because I live in one of the biggest conservative towns in Indiana. And more of my volunteers come from that county, and more of the people who've done, we have not had to apply for grant funding because we're very grassroots. We do very well. All of our 990s are on. People donate to us because they say, we can see where your money's going, right? We do the long form. there's people who want to help, regardless of the division that there is on the left or the right. You have more people who want to help this situation than you know, right? But we're so politicized and so divided, you know, and realistically, I want the end game to be not dependency. I want it to be independency. I ran into a guy who was in your first documentary. His name is Jonathan. Been homeless for 20 years. He goes in and out of getting apartments, right? He got mad because we weren't on his time frame of furnishing his apartment. I said, nobody gets paid to do this. Look, I got you a table, I got you a bed, I got you a microwave. Give me 2 weeks, I can get it in. He got mad. No one's ever dealt with the core root of why has he been homeless for 20 years in the first place, right? I don't want to create, I know there is a percentage of homelessness. I don't know what the number is, 15 to 30% with the mental, and where there could be a place where something like Housing First really makes a difference, right? I just don't, my question is what's the end game, right? Otherwise, we are going to inflate budgets, and you are going to have arguments on the left and the right about spending and money, right? And inflation ain't going nowhere. I don't know, am I preaching to somebody?
The end game is permanent housing. The end game is permanent housing and the stay house. And
Kathy was here. You know Kathy, right? Kathy,
she's not going to change.
She's not. You're 100% right.
So
you're
that's
100% right.
You know, so sometimes that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, my whole point, and I'll get back. My whole point is that there's going to have to be a certain point of summit between. I mean, you guys have no idea the work that's being done up here, and they have no idea the work that you guys can do and how you can be helpful to the overall. It's called One Homeless Response System. If you get that going, like the IU Hoosiers, you know, then it's going to be much better. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
All right, we're about time. I'm sorry. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. If you had a question, and I apologize, we did not have time to get to it. We've had questions for an hour and a half now. We really thought that would be adequate. On the table, when you go out the back door on the other side of this window, there's a survey. If you had a question that did not get answered, please put that question on that survey. If there was a specific person you wanted to ask it to, put their name or the police officer or the lady from the homelessness group or whatever you need to put. Put your name and some contact information, if you have an email address or a phone number, some way that we can get back to you with the answer. Because what I will do is, after we leave here today, and when I get into the office on Monday, we'll go through all of these, and we'll get whatever questions there are, we will get them sent out to the appropriate departments, who will then follow up back directly with you, if that's okay with all of you, for whatever your question is. Thank you all for coming today. It's been really good conversation and dialogue. I hope you learned something new. I hope you made some new connections. If we could give our panelists a round of applause, please. Thank you. We appreciate you all coming out. Also on this survey, we ask you about community conversations. WIDC started these last year as an opportunity for just this kind of dialogue and interaction. So if there are other things that you want to know about, not necessarily homelessness related, but about things that are happening in this community or in our city as a whole, and you would like to see a gathering like this for that, please include that in there, along with contact information. Again, so if we need to clarify or follow up with you, or when the time comes to let you know that maybe indeed that question is going to happen, and we'll have a conversation based exactly on what you want to know. So thank you again. Appreciate your time, and be safe out there.